Welcome to Ireland, home of leprechauns, Guinness and whiskey. But we're not here for that. No, we're here because there are hints of a stellar alignments that might suggest an extraterrestrial connection. One of these monuments can be found in an area locals call Bruna, located some 40 kilometers from Dublin or 25 miles and contain a minimum of 37 passage tombs from the Irish Neolithic era. Within Bruna, we have three large sites of these monuments: Douth, Knopf, and Newgrange. And it's in Newgrange the ancient alien proponents claim that we find this alien star alignment. While there are more tombs in the area, the focus is on the large chamber tomb that is beautifully decorated. And this pattern type is usually called megalithic art and consists of lozengans, curls and circles found here and in Gavranes in France. Something worth noting is that not all of these patterns are in visible places. Some are actually hidden from view. And the reason for this is unknown. It can be argued that it might be a ritualistic drawing, a message only for the gods. Some would say that it's due to a change in the building plan, or that they may be reused stones from another previously important monument. And the last statement might be the ones that's most plausible. We know that the area has been occupied since at least Mesolithic times, and in the western region of this monument we have signs of an earlier turf mound. And the turf mound seems to have been created around 3200 BCE. And while the construction of the main part of the cairn was started to be constructed around 3000 BCE. But how about that alignment? Well, it comes in two parts. The first is the winter solstice alignment that can be found at the Newgrange tomb. During about 5 days a year, during the winter solstice, a pencil of light is visible in the rear chamber of the grave. And this is possible due to what's referred to as, by archaeologists, a roof box. The sunlight does not enter the grave through the entrance, but of a kind of a dormer. But this is sunken in. Maybe a better description might that it's a funnel. One issue is that we're actually unsure if this roof box is an accurate reconstruction. When the archaeologist O'Kelly started to excavate Newgrange in 1962, it had fallen in quite some disrepair. But it was not the first time the passage tomb was excavated or opened. The earliest documented opening was by Edward Lived, and it took place around 1699 CE. And later excavation would follow in 1746, and disturbance around the entrance was reported in 1776. And it seems to have been opened in early 1800 too. William Wilde mentioned the roof box in 1849, but then it's theorized to have been an entrance maybe to a second chamber. So when O'Kelly started reconstruction, he did not only have to deal with years of, roots from trees moving things around, but also all of these past excavation to deal with. And something worth noting is that before O'Kelly's reconstruction, the roof box was not in a position that allowed light to enter the chamber, but by moving the stones designated RS1 and RS2 in the base of the roof box, the room would now see the sun during the solstice. Other passage tombs from this area have solstice alignments, but the alignments vary between locations. But we should consider, if O'Kelly had restored the lintel differently, would this change how this phenomenon took place? Was O'Kelly repairing the mound trying to find the astronomical connection, or was this just a happy coincidence? It would be strange if the roof box did not have some sort of astronomical function, but we should remember that what we see today is not what they might have seen all those thousands of years ago. So we can agree with the ancient aliens crowd here actually that the solar alignment might have been significant for the Neolithic people here. But in the show they don't really add much meaning to the solstice alignment, but then we're taking for, well, quite some ride.
The passage and chamber are cruciform in shape. They're shaped like a cross, which we think is very significant because it seems to be based on the shape of the constellation Cygnus, which is the swan constellation of the sky.
Anthony Murphy is correct that the tomb is shaped like a cross, but the comparison between the Swan constellation and the Newgrange is quite far-fetched. I guess you can make it work if you remove parts of the constellation, but then it's not the Cygnus constellation longer. Even if we only focusing on this crucifix form, it doesn't really match there either. The tomb has one short chamber going northeast and one even shorter room heading southwest. And trying to pair the mound with Cygnus is basically just wishful thinking and on the verge of being pareidolia. But there is an actual alignment that the ancient alien authors have missed. Most of these tombs are all skewed right. There's no excellent explanation for why this is, but it's not only the burials are skewed, we also find more arts and objects in the right side of the tomb. Also worth noting is that most would accept a solar or solstice connection, but there is no evidence for a stellar link at Newgrange or any other passage tomb for that part. This is just a wishful thinking from the proponents of these type of fringe ideas. And this is not new really, but we have covered the Orion Correlation Theory in the past, which is usually described something like this.
I discovered in the early 80s that there was a correlation between Orion's belt. In the layout of the three pyramids, you have two large pyramids aligned with each other and a third smaller one offset from that alignment. Well, that's the same way you have with the stars. You have two bright stars and a third less bright star offset from the line of the other two. The correlation is evident.
Now, this theory is predominantly argued by Robert Bauval and our friend Graham Hancock. They have in turn based most of their thought on Robert Temple's idea in The Serious Mystery, but in their book they have removed the aliens more studious. But as you might suspect, there is an issue. The pyramids of Giza do not align with Orion's belt if you don't flip the pyramids or the constellation upside down. Something Bauval leaves out. While the stars and pyramid might not be a perfect match today, he claims that they were back in 10,500 BCE. The magical date we know from Hancock, but there's one hitch. The pyramid is offset 38 degrees, but if it's based on Orion's belt in 10,500 BCE, it should be 50 degrees offset now. Not really a perfect match if we look closer, right? They also use different locations as evidence for this Orion's belt theory. We have Teotihuacan, Hopi Village in the US, we have the Thornborough of Henges in England. All of these sites suffer from the same issue on closer examination. They do not really line up with Orion's belt in another way that, well, if you squint your eyes, it's a fun idea, but it's not really credible. You can also find a lot of things that kind of look like other things by just random chance. I have 3 birthmarks that kind of look like Orion's belt. Does that mean that I have some ancient alien DNA and can start doing some Jedi mind tricks? And on that note, we'll take a quick break and I will go and see if I can levitate large boulders with my mind. But when we're back, we will investigate ancient flight path.